All right. Now we're at the point of the special where we are talking about the Universal monsters, the monsters that started it all. But we're starting with Frankenstein, and then we'll go to Bride. But first, the original Frankenstein. So the my history with the Universal monsters was I knew about them before even seeing the movies because the amount of times I went to Universal Studios and I saw all the monster stuff that they were doing. Um, there was even times where like family was talking about or doing stuff with it. I was like, all right, that's pretty cool. I like that. And then we started watching them, and I think Frankenstein was my second. It was either my second or my third. I feel like it was second because the first one I know for sure was Dracula. That was the first Universal monster that I saw was Dracula. So I think Frankenstein was second, and then Wolfman was third. But with Frankenstein, I knew kind of the basis of the story, not really knowing like, oh no, it's actually there's a lot more in detail than the movies let on. And we've gotten so many Frankenstein stuff. I mean, from, this, which is the closest we've gotten, I would say, to the actual source material, maybe until Guillermo del Toro's movie, which I'm looking forward to that. Or we've gotten, he's like almost like what was it, I Frankenstein, where he was like like a killer, he was an assassin or whatever the hell he was. So yeah, and then the upcoming Bride movie that Maggie Gyllenhaal's doing, that literally looks like a steampunk version of this. And I was like, okay, but I'll talk about more of that when we do Bride. But so my history with Frankenstein was I was old. I was when I eventually watched it, I was like, all right, I know this. And it was kind of during that age when I found just a lot of different movies slow. And that's the biggest issue. Actually, I think with a lot of these, with a lot of the monster movies from the 30s and 40s, was its pacing is incredibly slow. But they only make them like 70, 80 minutes long. And so there's, I'm not going to explain the story because everybody knows the story of Frankenstein. Everyone does. So I really liked, performances were great. Um, I think them changing, and then if I know the actual story of Frankenstein now. So I think from an adaptation wise, they did the best that they could, but this was also kind of like during the, movies that only come out for, I think, like 15 years or something like that. So it was kind of, does anyone really care to compare? No? Okay. We're just going to kind of change some stuff in here. But I think from an adaptation perspective, it does the best it can. It does the best job. In fact, I think this is the closest we've gotten to an actual like Frankenstein adaptation, like being on point. Maybe until Del Toro, but because that looks more accurate, just from visuals, that looks more accurate. So, but it's the thing is they had the daunting task of taking a description of the monster and trying to make something of it with the tools that they had and the technology that they had. And what they came up with was just classic. I mean, you take one look at it, you know exactly what it is. Or you think Frankenstein and you immediately go to God, why is his name escaping me? God, it's gonna kill me. you immediately go to his look in this, and it's just iconic. It's just super iconic, and it's just they do the best job they can, and with the technology, with the makeup and prosthetics and stuff that they have, which I actually read that you look at his mouth and he has like a hollowed out, like it almost looks like he's sucking in his cheeks. That's because he had false teeth and he just took them out, and it just looks that way. So I was like, oh, that's really cool. And so, you know, it's a classic. I don't know how much I can add on to this. The real issue I have, which comes with a lot of Universal monster films, is its pacing. Is that they are pretty slow, and also from an adaptation point of view, there's a lot of stuff from the book that is missing in here. That when I eventually watched Bride, because I will get to that, they put that in there. It's like, okay, all right, because it's almost like you have to watch this and Bride kind of back to back, because they take place like immediately after the last. But this is just iconic. You think Frankenstein, you immediately go to this. You don't think of anything else. If someone says like, it's almost like, when you watch, like for me, when I watch Batman, me growing up, I grew up with Kevin Conroy being Batman. And, I mean, playing him playing in the video games, playing or watching the animated series, just hearing his voice is like, that's Batman. So for this, you watch this, is like, that's the monster, not Frankenstein. That's the monster. And so, like, that's what I see. That's what I see. That's what I visualize as the monster. I don't visualize anything else. So, we'll see. But this, I mean, despite its pacing issues, despite some of the changes they make, it's classic. It's iconic. It's of course this isn't amazing. It's just iconic. I mean, if you are a horror fan, you need to watch this. And if you haven't, I don't know what's up. So yeah, this is just, I don't know what else I can add on to this, because the fact that this is almost 100 years old, and there's even parts in here where I'm like, I would like to know how they did that. And because it was the 1930s, it was like, I want to know how they did that. And especially like with, the technology they had, how do they pull this off? Because it was like, yeah, this is the first that they're doing this. Because I believe this and Dracula came out the same year. And so it was like, yeah, how did they do this? So this is iconic. Of course, it gets an amazing. So then they said, all right, well, let's take the part of the story where the monster wants a bride, make that a whole movie. And we got it with Bride of Frankenstein. So with Bride of Frankenstein, they said, okay, all the stuff that we couldn't fit into the first movie, we're going to put it in here. So what happens in the story is, after Dr. Frankenstein, or Frankenstein, whatever you want, creates the monster, the monster is like going around and is kind of like nice and stuff, but everybody sees a freak of nature. So that's when he starts going, he goes away and starts going on a killing spree. He then goes away for a while, comes back and says, hey, I'm lonely. I need a mate. So he then, builds a bride, but then last minute is like, nope, and destroys it. Well, they take that and go, okay, we're going to need some extra stuff with this. So they create a new character, a new doctor who blackmails Dr. Frankenstein into helping him create a female version of the monster. Of course, Frankenstein doesn't want to do it, but this guy, he's like, well, you're technically responsible for all those for the like killings and stuff like that the monster did. And also I'm gonna blackmail your ass. And that's when he's like, all right, fine, I'll do it. But in this one, we get some interesting stuff. Like the monster starts to talk. And also a little context, I didn't see this until fairly recently. And it was only recently that I was like, oh, so now all the stuff from Young Frankenstein is now making sense. Like the old blind man living by himself, that now makes sense. Because I'm like, I don't remember that in the story. Maybe he was there. I just skipped that part. But no, it was in this. It was in Bride of Frankenstein. So I was like, oh, that's making more sense now. So the monster now starts to talk. It's very little, but he starts to talk. And it's kind of like okay, he's, learning like almost like little baby steps. And also with this new character of Doctor, his experiments were puzzling, to say the least. His experiments, he, I guess, somehow shrunk people or brought like certain like figurines or something like that. He brought them to life or something. I don't really know. But when it happens, it was so like, what the hell? Like, I'm confused. So I'm like, I would kind of like to have context on how did he do this? Like, please, just a little bit, because this is just puzzling to me. Maybe you just had subjects and then dressed them up like this and gave them a special potion, and so they shrunk, like almost like a witch doctor kind of thing. It was baffling to me. I was like, what the hell is this? So, but that's him kind of saying like, this is what I can do. And it's like, how can this help with this? So, okay. So it was just a little puzzling. But I did like how they got everybody back from the first movie who lived. They got everybody back. And that was cool. And the makeup on God, again, name is going to kill me. Looks great. It looks great. They probably just like kept like all that stuff pristine and then just went, there you go, you're done. So, I like how they took a part of the story where it's like, you know what, we can make a sequel out of this. And that's kind of cool. Now, another problem I did have with this one was when the bride shows up, it's the very, very end of the movie. Like there's like 10 minutes left of the movie. And I was kind of like going, oh, so I understand like you built this whole thing up, but I think it would have been nice if that was like halfway through the movie, and a lot of that had to do with its pacing, which as I said with Frankenstein, a lot of the Universal Monsters movies, their pacing is very, very slow. So, but I mean, this does, a good job. I don't think as good as the first one, but it does a good job with doing with the source material. I think it does a pretty good job at that. It's just the real issue I have is, I would like context from certain parts, And I think it would have been better if the bride showed up halfway through the movie and not 10 minutes to the end. Maybe a little more screen time would have helped. But then again, if it was halfway through the movie and they introduced the bride, there's a huge section that is like, yeah, we're kind of skipping over that, aren't we? So maybe like some parts like introduced like earlier, and then we get into this, and then we kind of like, like kind of go like, all right, go. And then we can get to that. But then at the same time, in the original story, Frankenstein builds the bride, but then last minute destroys it. And so it's like, all right, well, there's really nothing else there. So we don't know what else to do. So, I mean, did this do a good job? Yes, it did. I would personally give this one a great. With the first one, it's amazing because of its iconic status in just horror in general. This one, not as good as that one, but it does a good job with what it's being given, and I think it does a really good job. So, yeah, that's personally for me, and yeah, both. If you have not seen Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein, watch them back to back, because they Bride literally happens like immediately after the first one ends, like immediately, and so they flow into each other very well. So honestly, both movies are kind of like an hour and 15 minutes or something like that. You can honestly watch like a 2.5 hour movie out of this, and it feels like, part one, part two, and they actually do a really good job at doing that. It's really, really well done on their part. And like I said with Frankenstein, the fact that both these movies are almost 100 years old and they still hold up for the most part, that's something right there. And they, you think of Bride of Frankenstein, what is the first like visual you see? You think of this. But mainly because this is one of the few ones that actually did it. But it's just iconic. You see someone like dressed up and it's like, yeah, I know exactly what that is. Even if you haven't seen it. It's that iconic. So if you haven't seen these two, definitely watch them. I would suggest like do like a double feature, like a back-to-back kind of thing. It's like a nice 2.5 hour run of it. I think you'll have a good time watching it. And it's classic.